Welcome to the 700 Club. The charges are widespread fraud to steal an election, and that's coming from President Trump's legal team. They're planning to file even more court challenges to prove their case.
What about proof? President Trump's lawyers offered some evidence, but say they're holding the proof for the courtroom. So what happens next? Ben Kennedy has the story from Washington.
Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani said the fraud was widespread.
Because there's not a singular voter fraud in one state. This pattern repeats itself in a number of states. Almost exactly the same pattern, which to any experienced investigator, prosecutor, would suggest that there was a plan from a centralized place to execute these various acts of voter fraud.
And attorney Sidney Powell talked about votes appearing out of nowhere.
Talking about some massive straight lines up in the vote tallies in the middle of the night after they've supposedly stopped counting. And that's when the Dominion operators went in and injected votes and changed the whole system.
Powell spoke of voting software being manipulated to change votes from President Trump to Joe Biden. Conservative Fox host Tucker Carlson pointed out Thursday night that Powell has said similar things recently, but when his show asked for evidence to back up her claims, they got none.
But she never sent us any evidence, despite a lot of requests, polite requests, not a page.
As for the question of evidence, it came up in Thursday's press conference. The Trump team said they aren't showing their proof yet. That will come in court. In other developments Thursday, Georgia finished its audit of the presidential race and confirmed Joe Biden won by more than 12,000 votes. The state also found no evidence of widespread fraud. The Trump campaign responded that Georgia's audit had included illegal ballots and asked for what it called an honest recount. President Trump is set to meet with Republican leaders of the Michigan legislature today at the White House to possibly discuss appointing electors who would support him. For now, his legal team will move forward with the challenges in court. Ben Kennedy, CBN News.
Our CBN News chief political analyst David Brody is with us from Washington. And David, welcome to the show. Got to ask you, if they're not going to go forward with proof in these press conferences, shouldn't they just shut down the press conferences? Why have them? I'm looking at this. It's a complete disaster for Trump. And why is he even doing it?
A couple reasons, Gordon. It's a PR battle. So you've got the legal battle and you've got the PR battle. And I'll be honest with you, I'm surprised they hadn't done a press conference earlier than yesterday. I mean, it made no sense. They were getting killed in the press on this daily. But they finally did it. And as Jenna Ellis said, she said that, look, this is the opening statement. And I thought what was interesting is she said, you know, the folks in the media want this to be an episode of Law and Order where it's all done in 44 minutes plus commercials for a total of 60, and that's just not the way the legal process works. Anyhow, the point to what you're saying is that from a PR standpoint, they had to come out and start to trickle out a few things of evidence. Now, the big question is, where's the rest of it? They're promising a big enchilada of evidence coming. Boy, they better have that, Gordon, or, you know, there's going to be obviously a lot of problems in a fallout situation from that.
Well, I will point out they have had other press conferences. There's the famous Four Seasons total landscaping. It just doesn't seem to be helping. Whenever they get in front of the cameras, it just doesn't seem to be helping.
Well, a couple of things. You know, the Four Seasons landscape situation was there. I think it was Rudy Giuliani, and then they had one in Nevada. They had different ones in different states. This one was in Washington, D.C. with the whole team of lawyers, and this should have happened a long time ago. And quite frankly, what they needed to do is present even more evidence. They're saying they can't release many of the affidavits they have. There are 8 public ones that are out there, but they can't release the rest of them because of potential death threats to these people and all of that. So, look, the bottom line is the media has been AWOL on all of this. I mean, in other words, they're chalking it all up to conspiracy theories. And the last time I checked, don't you have to investigate potential, when I say evidence, Dominion voting systems? And where's the Pulitzer Prize journalism out there that could pull off the journalism story of the century if they could find this? But they have no interest in doing that. I said, who do I mean by they? The national media. Look, Gordon, I've got a list, and I can send it to you. I'll send it to you after the show. I've got a list of all the local affiliates around the country doing fraud story after fraud story after fraud story. And remember, we know that the national media said there was no fraud. Then they said there's no widespread fraud. Now they're saying there's no systemic fraud. I mean, the goalposts keep moving. I guess I would just simply say that the evidence is clearly out there, but the media has been absolutely AWOL on all of this.
Well, I wouldn't expect anything else. I mean, the media has been campaigning against Trump since he was elected, so I'm not particularly surprised about that. Well, run me through when we're going to get to court and taking the Trump campaign at their word that they'll produce that in court. So when can we expect to see evidence produced in front of a judge?
Well, here's the dirty little secret, and it's back to December 14th when the electors will vote. And so this idea of when the court battle happens as compared to when the electors will vote, let's be honest, here's the secret. They don't want a court to decide anything before December 14th. I mean, they want this to be an electoral mess. And so on December 14th, electors may potentially not be able to go ahead and choose who they're going to vote for, if you will. Why? Because the court battles haven't been decided, and therefore certification can't happen. And I think that's what we're looking at, Gordon. And we've talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I think we had a discussion about what could happen from a state legislature standpoint. And here we go, Gordon. Donald Trump is going to meet, the President of the United States is going to meet with two top Michigan Republicans from the Senate and the House. He's going to talk to them, the state legislature, about, obviously, something along the lines of the electoral process. We don't know exactly, but that meeting is happening at the White House on Friday. And a lot of people are saying, what in the world is the president doing? But look, from a constitutional perspective, I talked to Alan Dershowitz the other day. He said the president's well within his legal rights to do it. Constitutionally, he can do it. And that's what the state legislatures are there for, to have a protection against what could be potential voter fraud in this election. I say could be. Let's see the evidence.
Okay, well, again, the question is always, let's see the evidence. But without people sort of buying in that there's evidence of widespread fraud, if you don't have that, and you have state legislatures coming in and saying we're going to invalidate the vote totals and vote our own slate of electors in so that our team gets to win, aren't you really playing with fire? I mean, at that point in time, does anyone trust our democracy anymore? I mean, all the allegations that we're looking at dictatorship, that we're looking at overthrowing democracy, all of those allegations come to the fore, and I would predict you'd see rioting in the streets.
Well, I think your prediction would come true. I think you're absolutely right. I will say this, that what you just laid out is the one argument for not doing what Trump's legal team wants to do. Trump's legal team will argue that why shouldn't there be a process? This is what the framers had intended all along. They were concerned about voting irregularities. They were concerned about voter fraud. And so, you know, the way the Trump legal team looks at this is that if, and that's the big if, we keep getting back to evidence, right? But if there is something out there, which the Trump campaign is going to have to show, but if it's out there, then this is the safeguard. This is the constitutional safeguard for it. But once again, back to the evidence. All
right. Well, you got to prove it. So hopefully they'll be in front of a judge pretty soon. That's my take on it. Well, David, thank you. Thank you for the analysis. And I'm predicting we're going to have more analysis. I would say this to everyone watching. Please pray for our country. This is an incredible turn of events. And now more than ever, we need to pray. Are we truly one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all? Please be in prayer for our nation. In other news, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo made history yesterday. He became the first top U.S. diplomat to visit a settlement in Israel's biblical heartland. His trip represented a dramatic shift in American policy, and Chris Mitchell brings us that story from Jerusalem.
Secretary of State Pompeo's visit to the Jewish community of Benjamin served a dual purpose. In addition to its historic nature, the stop at the Pizzagoat winery carried a strong business message. Pompeo declared that going forward, products produced in Israeli communities in the West Bank will be labeled Made in Israel. That move changed a decades-old U.S. policy. Pompeo also called the Boycott, Divest, and Sanctions movement, known as BDS, anti-Semitic, and that the U.S. would cut support to any groups participating in it. Pompeo also made the first official U.S. visit to the Golan Heights, which President Trump recognized as part of Israel in March 2019.
You can't stand here and stare out at what's across the border and deny the central thing that President Trump recognized that previous presidents had refused to do, that this is a part of Israel, and a central part of Israel.
On Wednesday, the U.S., Israel, and Bahrain marked their first ever trilateral meeting in Jerusalem, the latest milestone in the Abraham Accords.
Today, we're making history again. This is the first ever official ministerial visit from the Kingdom of Bahrain to the State of Israel. It marks another important milestone on the road to peace between our two countries and peace in the region.
Throughout all the meetings, it has been obvious the intention and keenness of all sides to ensure that the peace we are pursuing will be a warm peace that will deliver clear benefits to our peoples.
Pompeo emphasized the message sent to Iran.
These agreements also tell malign actors like the Islamic Republic of Iran that their influence in the region is waning and that they are ever more isolated, and this shall forever be until they change their direction.
Also Thursday, the New York Times reported the Palestinians are considering ending the so-called pay-to-slay program to gain favor with a potential Biden administration. This program pays convicted Palestinians in prison and their families up to $4,000 a month for terror attacks, including murdering Israelis. However, Itamar Marcus of the Palestinian Media Watch tells CBN News he feels it's unlikely the Palestinians will give up the program, since it's such a part of Palestinian society. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has said numerous times the martyrs and their families are sacred, and so are the wounded and the prisoners. Even if we have only a penny left, it will only be spent on the families of the martyrs and the prisoners. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Just to let you know, we've reached out to the New York Times reporter behind that story to ask what's your source and what are the facts to back up that the Palestinian Authority wants to end that. I don't think that you've got a credible source, and I don't think they're ever going to abandon the payment to what they refer to as the Shaheed, the martyrs for the cause. Their children are taught in school all day, every day, to drive out Israel from Jerusalem by force of arms. They've always held on to the drive them to the sea. They train children in incitement, and then they reward people when they go out and kill Jews. And I, for one, do not want my taxpayer dollars going to fund that. That's what's happened, and it's been happening for a long time. It happened under the Clinton administration, happened under the Bush administration, it happened under the Obama administration. Under the Trump administration, we finally had somebody that said, this is nuts. We should not be funding attacks against Israel, and we should enforce our own laws. There is on the books, finally, the Taylor Force Act, which prohibits it. There's also another act that was passed in 2018 that allows individual Americans to sue recipients of U.S. foreign aid if any of it goes into an act of war, and terrorism is included in that. So to just sort of blindly say we found some source that they're willing to change that in order to give cover for what may be an incoming Biden administration, I just don't get it. We need to recognize it for what it is. It is anti-Semitism in the most extreme level, where you pay for Israelis to be killed. You pay people to go out and kill Jews. I can't imagine any U.S. administration wanting to continue that.